Right, so let me get this straight, boss, Varuna said to Mr. Card in his quiet cabin. You want me to go to an abandoned dock, by myself, with tons of credits to purchase something from a man we don't know? Well, yes, the man replied. He really was on the receiving end of Varuna's icy stare, and it made him fidget a little. Doesn't sound great when you put it like that, sure, but I believe we can trust this deal. I've been in contact with that local foreman over the past month or so, and he helped organize it. Turns out he owed us a favor for a certain delivery a few years ago, so there shouldn't be any troubles there. For you, sure, because you won't be there. But I don't like the idea of going there alone, especially to a place without any witnesses. This sounds like a trap. But fine, I'll assume this isn't a setup. So, once I'm there, you want me to pick up some unknown container from the man and deliver it back here to the ship, so we can deliver it to some, also unknown, client of yours. Well, yes, that's very much the gist of it. Alright, sounds simple enough. I refuse. Good. Wait, what? Didn't you just say it would be easy? I said simple, not easy. And it could be, or it could be a death trap. And sorry to say, boss, I'm not walking into one without knowing what the hell is going on. Like, for example, what even is the cargo I'm picking up? Mr. Cart shook his head and stared Varuna right in the eye, for the first time in many months without his helmet in the way. Look, I know it sounds wrong, but trust me, it's better if you don't know. Preferably no one should know, for your own safety. The woman raised her eyebrow at that. Boss, don't make me flaunt my combat experience. I can take care of myself. What's more, you need me. And do you remember what we said when we decided to work together all those years ago? We can double-cross the universe, but we won't double-cross each other, ever. So either be honest with me, or I'll walk out and get back to business as usual. It was difficult to read Mr. Cart's emotions on his face, even without his enviro helmet, but it was clear he weighed risks and rewards there. Finally, he sighed and relented. Fine, you'll be picking up 2 AI cores, beta models. We are to deliver them to our client as soon as possible. Varuna's stare was cold before, but now it turned to ice. AI cores? In an empty dock on some backwater station? Boss, are you insane? This is almost certainly Tritakian setup. You know these things are trouble and that, considering our history with Tachyons, we should stay as far the fuck away as we can. I know, but the deal is worth risking. Yes, risking my life or my freedom, not yours. No. Look, there's a reason why it took me so long to prepare for this deal. I've been keeping tabs on this station and on Tritakion in general. I bribed at least 30 people over the past few weeks, and the intel they provided all points to the same thing. Tritakion has no idea about this, and no agents on site, except for usual trade representatives. I can vouch for that info with my life. So you say. But fine, let's assume the corporation is not in on it. I still can't believe someone wants to sell AI cores, especially to nobodies like us. Well, that's the thing. That wasn't the original plan. The League and Hegemony want to buy them as well, but I outbid them. This time, Varuna's jaw just dropped. What? You want us to walk right in between 2 major factions in the sector? I mean, sure, we're doing that all the time, but you know that when AI is involved, all gloves come off. Anything goes wrong, we're dead. All of us. I know. But our provider is a pragmatic person. He wants creds, we'll get him creds. Far more than whatever amount the government wanted to pay him. Do we even have this kind of money? Or do you intend to sell us into indentured servitude forever to fund this? No. The client provided all the funds. We're just here to get the goods physically and deliver them. Won't cost us a thing. Fine. But what's stopping this contact of yours from just taking the money and still selling us out both to Hegemony and the League? Simple. If any one of those governments even suspects that he was trying to swindle them, they'd kill him. In fact, the main reason why our client managed to outbid them was because they thought they could just pay less because they threatened our man. So instead, we'll give him the money he wants, so he'll be able to disappear, which means no trace for the governments to follow, either him, us, or our client. I see. It sounds convoluted, but I guess it could work. Still, who even is that client of yours? Not many people could outbid Hegemony. I don't know. Mr. Card said, and then, because all lies should contain a grain of truth, he added, "All I know is that they identified themselves as N, and seem to have a history with Tritakian. But that's all I know. I don't think they're with the company right now, but I used all my intel sources and couldn't find anything on them. Whoever this N is, they cover their tracks well. Which makes me fear they'll remove us as a loose end once this is done. But fuck it, no risk, no reward, I'll do it, since you seem confident in this plan. But half of the payment goes to me for sticking my neck out. Deal?" "Deal." They shook hands, and Mr. Cart put on his helmet again. "Then let's get to business and prepare, shall we? Here are the plans of the stations and the area the deal will take place in." "Damn, you really went all in with the bribes, didn't you, boss?" "Hey, I'm not letting you walk in there without at least 5 escape routes. You teach me that yourself." She nodded and looked at the schematics. A few hours later, the plan was ready, and despite still having doubts, Varuna agreed that it was pretty solid and left to prepare herself for the deal. Hopefully, things would go smoothly, but in case they didn't, she had to be at her peak form, so she locked herself up in her quarters and spent the next few days relentlessly practicing with her knives and pistols. A few days later, the fleet arrived at Derinkuyu station, but only a handful of people were allowed ashore, as Mr. Cart clearly wanted to be able to leave quickly and without any delays. He sent his drone with Varuna, and together they went to an older, almost completely forgotten part of the station, so uninhabited that Varuna sometimes had to put on her helmet to move through areas without any breathable air. But after a few moments they reached the spot, an old, abandoned dock, where their contact, a gruff, bearded man, was waiting for them. As soon as he noticed them, though, he raised a pistol. "This was supposed to be a man-to-man deal. The fuck are you?" he asked. Varuna stepped forward, but Mr. Cart spoke through his drone. "Apologies, just a little precaution. Mr. Wyatt, I presume? I can't really be seen making this deal, but I can assure you my assistant is only here to pick the goods up and pay you. She will not cause any issues." "Sure she won't," the man replied, slowly lowering his gun. His finger remained close to the trigger, though. "But in that case, she drops her knives on the floor and kicks them over to me, right now, or the deal's off." "Understood. Before that happens, though, do you have the goods?" "You got the money?" Varuna flashed a small cred stick in her hand and then pocketed it. Mr. Wyatt kicked open the box that was on the ground next to him. Inside were 2 yellow metal cylinders wrapped in a bunch of wires. Small lights were occasionally blinking on both of them. "Good. Varuna, hand the man your knives. I expect them to be sent back to my ship later, Mr. Wyatt." "Yeah, sure, whatever. I'll send the mailman." "There you are, good girl. Now, come on over here and give me the creds." Varuna did just that, doing her best to not snap at this guy. He grabbed her hand and held it for a few seconds before he finally took the credit and stepped back, smiling. She didn't like that smile at all. She stepped back as well and started reaching for the box when what she expected happened. "Pleasure doing business with you outsiders," Wyatt said, his eyes gleaming. 2 cargo containers around them suddenly opened, and a bunch of heavily armed men ran out of them and surrounded Varuna and her boss's drone. Varuna slowly raised her hands. "Thing is, doing business with hegemony is also good, and I really don't want to get on their bad side, you know? So I thought to myself, wouldn't the High and Mighty himself be happy if I delivered him not only these dreadful cores that apparently don't exist, but also a bunch of shifty types who were trying to take them away from him? You know, get 2 or even 3 paydays in one move. Feels like a smart thing to do, ain't it? And hey, don't look so glum, lass. Be angry at your boss for setting you up here instead of coming by himself. Some man he is." Varuna did her best to not nod in agreement. "Ah, of course we should have expected this," Mr. Cart said, oddly unfazed through the drone. The machine swung around and slowly drifted to the floor. "And you prepared this quite well. 8 guards and more in the corridor we came through. 1 sharpshooter on the walkway, who had my assistant here zeroed in from the moment she walked into the room, and you even took her knives." "Yeah, I did. All 4 of them. Better safe than sorry in this line of business." "Very true. But 4 knives, you say? Varuna, would you kindly tell the man how many do you usually carry?" The woman looked straight at the bearded man, her eyes empty. 6, she whispered, and suddenly everything happened very fast. Wyatt wasn't some naive youngster and believed he saw his fair share of things in life. But never, not even in his worst nightmares, he saw someone moving like Varuna just did. He knew about implants and enhancing drugs, sure, but it was one thing to have them and completely different to know how to use them. This woman, however, she knew exactly what to do. Within 2 seconds, all Wyatt's guards on the ground had their throats slit in one swift, inhuman motion. They were dead before they hit the ground. He turned to the sharpshooter, only to see him falling to the ground, a knife lodged firmly in his eye. 4 more men rushed through the door, but Varuna already grabbed a pistol from one of the corpses and pulled the trigger. All guards dropped, one by one, with holes directly in their foreheads. She turned to the double-crossing contact and raised the gun again, ready to pull the trigger, but in that moment the drone floated up from the floor. "Varuna, there's no need for that," Mr. Card said. "We can all still resolve this peacefully and profitably." The would-be scammer gathered himself slowly from the floor, stunned by this murderous spectacle that took exactly 5 seconds. He raised his hands high above his head, his earlier smugness replaced by sheer terror. "Madam, you should listen to your boss friend," he stammered, backing away. He kicked the box containing the cords towards Varuna. "There's no need for further violence. I have realized the error of my ways. Please, we can all—" But he wasn't meant to finish that sentence, because next time he opened his mouth, a blade came right out of it, accompanied by a sickening noise of a breaking spine. He looked at Varuna confused and slowly slid to the ground, already dead. The woman stared at this scene in shock, and after the body fell to the ground, she looked into eyes gleaming in the dark behind him. Eyes that looked very, very familiar. "Hello, sister," Varuna said, coiling herself like a spring, ready to lunge. "Hello, 17," a familiar voice said in the dark, as the shadow there stepped forward. "Or should I call you a traitor, like the rest of us do?" The new arrival stepped into the light, and through his drone, Mr. Card saw Varuna and her exact copy standing in the same room, pointing their blades at each other. They were identical, save for their clothes. Varuna wore an old, worn spacer suit, while the other one sported a slick, jet-black power armor, dotted with signs of Tritacian Corporation. "Call me however you like, sister," Varuna said, and both women started to slowly circle each other. "I see you're still Tritac's little attack dog." "Spare me your bullshit, traitor," second Varuna replied, and lowered the visor of her helmet. "You killed so many of us when you left, and you killed Mother. And for what? So you could live a life of a spaceborne beggar, scraping years for credits that you could have earned during a single assignment?" "Aye, and then spend those credits on whatever our corporate masters told us to," Varuna said, shaking her head. "And then be discarded like all others before us, and either thrown into recycling vat or repurposed as a domestic servant. So yes, I didn't have many reservations when I had the chance to blow up that complex where they made us. I'm not proud that I had to kill so many of our sisters in the process, but they're better off dead than being corporate slaves." "I'm glad you justified this murder to yourself so conveniently, traitor," the black-clad woman said. "But it doesn't matter. You failed, and now you're involved in dealing with AI Corps, which puts you straight on top of Tritac's shit list." "Ah, and I thought I was there already," Varuna snickered. "Don't flatter yourself, girl. The CEOs don't give a damn about some malfunctioning runaway doll, but now they will. So I'll give you one chance. Surrender yourself and the course peacefully, and I'll tell them you were having delusions when you escaped, and maybe they won't throw you into biomass recycler. But please, do resist." "I planned on it from the start. One thing before that, though. Do you even have a name?" "It's 79, Tritacian soldier said. "And yes, it means exactly what you think." Varuna didn't reply. Instead, she lunged forward, grabbed a knife from the dead man's throat in front of her, and threw it at 79's visor. She did that in one fast motion, and her throw was true. The face-covering plate shattered, and the other woman staggered backwards, trying to regain her posture. "Damn, they really made you differently in the first batch. 79 said, opening her helmet again, and rushed at Varuna with full speed. Second later, they were both on top of each other, knives swirling and swinging with outlandish speed. Varuna's moves were faster, if only slightly, but 79's armor worked to her advantage, and few seconds later, Mr. Cart's lieutenant jumped backwards, bleeding from 3 shallow cuts. One of her knives shattered on the armor. "Sloppy, traitor," 79 said smugly. "Good genes and production, yes, but clearly zero training. They would have decommissioned you after such a show." She charged once again, and Varuna focused on defense, using her superior speed to deflect every attack, until finally there was an opening to kick her opponent away and increase the distance. "See, 17? The other one said. "No matter how fast you are, without company equipment you can't—" She didn't finish her monologue, because right in that moment Mr. Cart's drone discharged 200,000 volts right into her armor. 79 spasmed and fell to the ground. "Varuna, grab the box and get the hell out of here," Mr. Cart said, as his drone cracked and smoked from the discharge. She rushed into action without words and picked up the box. "Thanks, but you could have helped before she slashed me all over, boss," she said, limping towards the exit. "Tried, but you were too close. Good thing you noticed me floating behind her." "Better that she didn't notice you there. Wait, shit!" Those last words were said as she tossed the box containing AI cores right at her boss's drone, pushing it out of the way of an incoming projectile. Then she turned around just in time to see 79 pointing her gun at her. "They're making us more resilient than you, 17, she said and pulled the trigger. Varuna dodged, almost. The bullet dug deep into her arm and threw her to the ground. Mr. Cart's drone rushed towards the black-armored woman, ducking and weaving on the way, but she knocked it down with another shot. "Fucking hell, not another one!" he shouted back in his cabin on CLS Second Chance, but there was no time to waste, so he immediately opened another comm channel and hoped Varuna could hold on a bit longer. Back in the abandoned dock, 79 didn't gloat. She was in too much pain for that. Instead, she tried to shoot Varuna again, but the lieutenant managed to crawl behind some long abandoned containers and did her best to stop the bleeding from her arm. Every time Tritakian assassin came closer, she scrambled to another bit of cover, until a few minutes later, Varuna crawled all the way to the end of the dock. She managed to stuff bits of her suit into the wound, so she wasn't bleeding so bad anymore, but it was clear she wouldn't get out of this spot easily. She gripped her blade tightly and prepared to take at least one more bullet, maybe her last, when she heard a gunshot. But not up close, but somewhere further away, coming from the entrance. It echoed across the empty dock, followed by another voice.
"This is Captain Martinez of Hegemony Navy. Everyone in this room is under arrest for violating Hegemon's anti-artificial intelligence edict. You have 3 seconds to surrender. Move and you die."
He paused for a second and then continued.
Wait, that's Tritakian's signs you have on you. Fuck it, light it up, lads.
And suddenly, entire dock was filled with bullets. Varuna flattened herself on the ground, cursed her luck and started crawling away. She hoped that this firestorm caught 79 by surprise too. And indeed, the assassin had to take cover as well, and every time she tried to shoot back, unseen shooters filled the air around her with bullets. "This is a neutral station, Navy man," she shouted over the sounds of gunfire. "I have a right to be here. The board will consider this an act of war." In response, someone fired an explosive round at her. Hegemony troops had no idea where exactly their targets were, but it still landed close enough. "That brings me back," Varuna muttered, and kept crawling, looking for a way out of this mess. Unfortunately, when she picked from behind the containers, situation was only looking worse. 2 groups, 3 soldiers each, were moving along the catwalks on both sides of the dock, preparing to outflank them. Further down, a line of another 10 or so slowly approached, laying down constant suppressive fire. Varuna remembered it from her marine days. Usual superior firepower strategy to keep enemies down until the flankers delivered the final blow. What's more, it looked like 79 managed to grab the box with AI cores, and was now crawling between boxes, also looking for a way out. She wouldn't be able to escape though. and the same was true for Varuna. The flankers reached their position on both sides, raised their weapons and started to slowly, methodically fire grenades at the crates below, forcing both women to crawl back towards the center. But then, just as Varuna was thinking on how to deal with as many of the enemy soldiers before they killed her, the situation in the room suddenly, and very loudly, changed. 3 men on one of the catwalks suddenly disappeared. It wasn't anything magical or unexplained. What happened to them was what happens to human body, even one wearing hegemony infantry armor, when it's met by a fist-sized solid metal round, flying through the air at 3 kilometers per second. In one moment, the 3 soldiers were aiming their launchers, and a millisecond later there was only a tiniest flicker of red mist in the air as the round impacted the wall on the other side of the dock with a thunderous crash. A hand, still clutching a launcher, fell to the ground with a wet thud. The other group of flankers noticed and started looking around for the source of that shot, and one of them noticed 2 people holding something like a rocket launcher standing in the maintenance door on the other side. He raised his weapon, but at this moment another round came in, and the man vanished just like his friends. The other 2 fired their grenades, but missed, panicked by this sudden, deadly interruption. Another 2 rounds went past them and buried themselves deep in 10-meter thick station wall behind. "House, stop missing!" Zala shouted as another grenade exploded too close to her. "I'm trying, but I was high as a kite when I built this thing, and you swaying around doesn't help," House replied and pulled the trigger again, removing another hegemony soldier. The third and last of the flankers lost all nerve then and tried to run away, but Varuna finished him off with a knife throw. "The hell are you doing here?" she shouted, finally noticing House and Zala in the maintenance door. "Boss told us to expect trouble before we landed, so House brought his coil gun," Zala replied and tried to move forward, only to be stopped by a hail of gunfire from the rest of Hegemon's troops. "Stay there, there's more of them coming. I'll get our package and get to you." "Got it. Wait, but since you're talking, then who is that?" Varuna immediately realized what was going on. "Oh shit, shoot her!" she shouted, and rushed from behind cover. 79 was already almost on top of Zala and House though, the box with cores in her hand. She kicked the door, which smashed right in Zala's face, pushed the Pather right into the wall and stabbed House in the chest so hard the blade came out from the other side. She turned back to see the look of sheer fury on Varuna's face and moved her hand to close the door and leave her stuck with hegemony troops, but something was holding her hand. "Missy," House said over the sound of his whirring life support machinery. "I haven't had my heart there for at least 3 decades now." And then he pulled the trigger. 79 had good armor, but House's coil gun, even though it looked like an ancient cannon with some flashy bits strapped to it, could make holes in smaller spaceships. As a result, only 79's head, neck and the arm that House was holding remained. The rest of their body exploded into fragments and sprayed blood all over the place. There was a brief look of complete, utter confusion on the woman's face, and then all the lights went out and her remains slumped to the ground. Varuna had a brief, macabre thought that this wasn't the first time she watched someone with her face die, but this was certainly the worst. She shook it off, crawled the last few meters to the maintenance door and slammed it behind her. She was breathing so heavy she could barely hear when House was checking if Zala was still alive. The former Pather was moving, and complaining about broken nose, so she certainly was. "Okay, princess, care to explain to us why your twin was here and tried to kill us?" House said, helping Zala get up. She also looked at Varuna with unspoken question in her eyes. "Later," Varuna finally managed to say. "We have to get out of here before they blow up the door. Do you have contact to Mr. Cart? And tell him that the fleet needs to get the fuck out of here right now, and that we need to disappear for a while, somewhere far away from inhabited space." She said those last words already running, and the other 2 followed her as sounds of banging on the door grew louder behind them. 15 minutes later, they were back on CLS Second Chance, and the entire fleet was already speeding out of the dock. "How did they even let us out? I heard a lockdown alarm when we were entering the ship," Varuna asked over the comm, sitting in the medbay. Dr. Disco was looking at her with a professional curiosity. Word travelled fast, and he already heard something about Varuna and her twin, and was wondering how they were connected. Well, apparently Station Council was willing to overlook one little fleet going away, for a generous donation, Mr. Cart replied. How generous? 150,000 creds, Mr. Cart muttered, and Varuna felt pain far worse than the one caused by bullets. Still, it was better than being arrested by Hegemony. And hey, her boss continued, we just happened to pick up a delivery job to some outer sector, so we'll be able to hide out, as you said, and maybe even earn some money back in the process. Good. Traitek and Hegemony will be combing the area like crazy for the next few weeks. The sooner we disappear, the better. Already plotting a course for a jump point, but Varuna, people are talking already. I told them to leave you alone while you rest, but they will want to know. Of course they bloody will, she said weakly. Tell them they can stick those questions up theirs, and if they don't like it, then tell them that I can still swing my knife. But do thank Zala and House for me, would you? Already did. Now rest up. And good job. But there was no time to talk anymore. Not for now, at least. For Varuna was right. And after everything that happened, Cart Logistic had to get itself lost good and proper, far away from prying eyes. And hide themselves they did, and when they came back to Ilm a few weeks later, it seemed that the heat caused by their actions died down a bit. Or, to be more precise, was redirected. Apparently, Hegemony officials recovered a corpse of a woman wearing Tritakian sigil, and though corporate PR denied it fervently and called her a rogue operative, tensions were high, which meant no one really paid any attention to a small battered fleet of mostly civilian ships. Once they docked at the spaceport, Mr. Cart sent the AI course out to his employer via small cargo drone, and he made clear to everyone to not attempt to follow it, as the contact could disappear if they thought they were being tracked. There were some raised eyebrows and puzzled looks, but no one really complained, especially since weirdness was pretty much all Mr. Cart did, locked away from his own crews all the time. Few minutes later, a nice sum of credits was moved to Cart Logistics' account, almost covering the bribe they had to pay to flee Derinkuyu station. And, true to his word, the boss transferred half of these earnings to Varuna, who already had ideas on how to use them. But it wasn't the only reward, to both Mr. Cart's and his entire fleet's surprise. The other one was a ship, an Alastor-class frigate, delivered to the docks, seemingly without anyone piloting it. Chief, my lads finished the sweep and, fuck me, whoever hired us, we should do jobs for them more often, Zala said over the comms few hours later. The engines say that the ship is in a pristine condition, like straight from the dry dock. It even still smells of paint inside. You should have told us we'll be getting a new toy like that. Trust me, I had no idea myself, Mr. Cart replied, truthfully. Guess our employer was happy with our results. And hey, we may get another reward like that in the future, cause I just scored us another contract with them. And we should let Aurora take the lead on this one. She'll love it. It's a construction contract. Sounds exhilarating, Zala said sarcastically. Still, her head still hurt after being smashed into a wall, so maybe a boring contract like that was indeed something they needed after way too much action on Derinkuyu station. Well, if it pays as good as this one, then I'm all in for it. But about this new ship, there's one thing my techies found weird. It came with this weirdly poetic name, but every time we try to change it, it just reverts itself back to the original one. Nothing problematic, but it doesn't really fit the rest of the fleet, you know? I do, but I'd say it's worth giving it a chance, don't you think? I'm sure Midnight Dissonant will turn out to be very useful. Thank you, Midnight Dissonant replied, but only Mr. Cart could hear it.